Okay, so this Manti Te'o story,
Yeah.
We've got some articles and research here,
Right.
and it's still just wild to me.
Yeah.
We all kind of remember the headlines, star athlete falls for this girl online,
Right.
but she never even existed.
It's crazy, right? And what's so interesting about this story is I think it's not just the deception itself. It kind of brings up all these bigger questions about identity and the internet and how easy it is to be manipulated online.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I want to get into with you, because it's not like this was some random online thing.
Right.
Like, Manti was completely invested in this relationship with Lennay.
Oh, yeah.
They talked all the time,
Constantly.
sharing their dreams and fears. Lennay even virtually met his family.
Wow.
He truly believed they were building a life together.
It's really, I think it gets really chilling when you think about it this way.
Yeah.
The Catfish Lennay Kekua was really playing on like basic human needs. That need to connect, that need for a love for support, especially when you're under a lot of stress.
Right.
And remember, Manti was a huge football star at the time.
Absolutely.
So much pressure.
It's almost like Lennay was building this whole other reality just for Manti.
Yeah.
Perfectly tailored to exactly what he needed and wanted.
Like, it wasn't just about making up a fake person.
Yeah.
It was creating this whole story that would pull Manti in.
Exactly. And that's where I think understanding how catfishing works is so important.
Yeah.
It's more than just being tricked. It's like you're being lured into this fantasy.
Right. It's a total illusion.
Yeah.
That speaks to your deepest desires, so the deception is even more powerful.
And the details are just insane.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
Like Lennay's car accident, the leukemia diagnosis.
I know.
It was also carefully woven into the story.
It's like a movie or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Almost like they were designed to make Manti even more emotionally dependent on her.
Oh, for sure. And we can't forget about the media here. Yeah. This wasn't just a private thing. It was everywhere. It was national news.
Front page.
This tragic love story became a part of how people saw Manti.
Totally.
And I think that probably made it even harder for him to question what was going on.
Right. It's like the more public it got, the more trapped he felt.
Exactly.
He had to keep believing, not just for himself, but for everyone else who was invested in the story.
Yeah, and then boom, Deadspin drops this huge investigation.
I know it.
And it's not just that Lennay wasn't who she said she was.
Right.
She didn't exist at all.
I remember when that came out, it was just shocking.
It was unbelievable.
Like, how could Manti, someone so smart and successful, be fooled like that?
It's easy to think that, but that's the whole point, Yeah. Catfishing, it preys on our emotions, not our intelligence.
Right. It's not about being gullible. It's about those deep vulnerabilities.
Exactly. And in Manti's case, the story was so perfectly crafted to play on his fears and what he wanted that it must have been impossible for him to see through it.
So we've got this whole web of manipulation here.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing I still can't wrap my head around is the why.
I know, me too.
What would make someone go to these lengths to deceive another person like this?
Right. It just seems so cruel.
It really does.
Well, in Lennay's confession, he said it came from his own struggles with identity and feeling really lonely.
Interesting.
He talked about wanting to feel in control,
Okay.
Like he wanted to create this world where he could control the narrative.
I see.
Even if it meant hurting other people along the way.
Wow, I don't think anyone was expecting that.
Me neither.
It adds this whole other layer to the story, doesn't it?
Right.
Because it shows that even the person doing the catfishing might be caught in their own issues.
Exactly. It really blurs the lines between victim and perpetrator.
Yeah.
And while what Lennay did was definitely harmful,
of course,
his actions also came from a place of pain and needing connection.
It's so complex.
It is.
So much more than just the headlines. We're talking about some deep psychological stuff here.
Totally.
You have Manti again, who's the victim of this horrible deception.
Right.
But then we have to think about the fact that the person who deceived him was also struggling.
Yeah, and that's what makes it such a fascinating story, even all these years later.
I agree.
It makes us face this uncomfortable truth.
That's that.
That even in the craziest situations, there are always these human emotions and vulnerabilities at play.
It's like a Shakespearean tragedy, but in the digital age,
Totally.
This mix of ambition and love and betrayal.
And the consequences of our actions.
Yeah, it's all right there.
It all comes together in this story.
It really does. And it's like, this wasn't just some one-off thing,
Right.
This whole thing happened back in 2012.
Yeah.
Social media is just blowing up.
Totally.
I feel like we were all still kind of figuring out how it all worked.
Yeah, I think you're right. We were all so excited about the internet back then.
Right.
Connecting with people around the world, sharing our lives. It felt revolutionary.
Totally.
But then this case kind of exposed this dark side to all that connection.
Right, because it went beyond just being fooled, you know?
Exactly.
Manti's life was totally turned upside down.
Oh, yeah.
The media scrutiny, the public humiliation, it all played out so publicly.
Lay a national stage.
It's hard to imagine what he went through emotionally.
I know. And here's something I find really interesting.
Okay.
Online dating was also taking off around the same time.
Oh, that's true.
So you have all these people putting themselves out there online,
Right.
often without knowing much about the person on the other side of the screen.
So you've got this perfect storm brewing, this fascination with online connection, the anonymity of the internet.
And maybe people being a little too trusting of what they see online.
Exactly. And that's where the ethical stuff comes in, you know?
Oh, for sure.
What Renaya did wasn't just wrong. It was really damaging.
It wasn't a joke
Right. This was calculated manipulation.
with real consequence.
Real consequences for Manti and everyone around him. Exactly. And I think it's important to remember his family and friends.
Oh, yeah?
They were grieving too.
Of course.
Offering him support during this time of supposed loss.
They were victims too.
They were all deceived.
This is where I get stuck, though.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, you have Manti, the victim of this awful hoax.
Right.
But then there are all these signs that something wasn't right.
I know what you mean.
How could he not see it?
It's easy to look back and say that, but we have to remember the context.
Yeah.
Online relationships were still pretty new, and I don't think people knew how sophisticated catfishing could be.
So it's like we all learned this really hard lesson from what happened to Manti.
I can feel.
It made us face this dark side of online interaction.
And realize that the internet can be a place where people deceive others.
So it's not about avoiding the internet altogether.
No, of course not.
It's about being more careful, right?
Exactly.
Learning to ask the right questions.
Verifying information.
Trusting your gut when something feels off.
It's about being skeptical without being cynical.
Right.
And understanding the tactics that catfishers use.
Which are?
Well, they often target people who are vulnerable, lonely, or looking for validation.
It's almost like we need a whole new set of skills for the internet.
Digital literacy.
Yeah, not just for kids, but for adults too.
Right. We need to be able to think critically about the information we see online.
Understand how people can manipulate us.
Know how to protect ourselves.
And this is where I think Manti's story can be so valuable.
I agree.
Not just as a warning, but as a way to start a conversation.
Yeah, we need to be talking about this stuff openly and honestly.
Sharing our experiences and learning from each other.
It's the only way to make things better.
It's interesting how this case went from being a sports story to this huge cultural phenomenon.
I know, it happened so fast.
It touched on so many parts of our lives.
Technology, relationships, identity, the media,
It's like it held up a mirror to society.
and forced us to face some hard truths.
And I think that's why it's still relevant today. It's not just about Manti.
It's about all of us and how we deal with this increasingly complex digital world.
I'm curious, what do you think is the most important takeaway here?
That's a great question.
Is it the manipulation, the media's role, or something else entirely?
Well, we've talked about a lot.
We have.
The catfishing itself, the
I think-
societal context, even the psychology of both Manti and Renaya.
Right.
But I think we have to be careful not to oversimplify things.
It's tempting to just label Manti as naive or somehow complicit,
I know, right?
but I think it's much more complicated than that.
Absolutely. His experience shows how real the dangers of online deception are,
Right.
but it also reminds us that we all need connection, even if we sometimes look for it in the wrong places.
And that's where the real tragedy lies.
I agree.
At its core, this is a story about a young man who was looking for love and acceptance.
And ended up being exploited in such a public way.
His story reminds us that even online, where connections can feel so fleeting.
That desire for real human connection is still incredibly strong.
Yeah, it's like we're all trying to find that balance online.
Uh-huh.
Being open to connecting with people,
Right.
but also protecting ourselves.
Yeah, totally. And it's getting even harder as the lines between online and offline life get blurrier.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Our profiles, our dating apps, online communities.
It's all part of our online identity,
Exactly. And those digital identities, they can be really powerful.
right? It affects how people see us.
Uh-huh. Our relationships, even our jobs.
It's like we're all creating these ideal versions of ourselves online.
Presenting the best version, not the messy reality.
Exactly, and that's where the deception comes in.
Right, because it's so easy to hide behind those perfect online facades.
To be someone you're not.
Exactly.
Which brings us back to that question you asked earlier.
Oh, yeah.
How do we find real connection in a world that's so focused on virtual interaction?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
Recognizing that the internet is a tool. Like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
So true.
We have to be careful about the information we consume.
And the relationships we form.
And how we present ourselves online.
It's almost like we need a new set of ethics for the digital world.
Digital ethics, I like that.
Right. Like guidelines for how we treat each other online.
A framework for trust and real connection.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, whether we're talking face-to-face or through a screen,
we're all still human.
We have feelings, and we can be hurt.
And we can hurt others.
And I think something we can't forget is forgiveness.
Oh, that's so important.
Because like we saw with Manti,
yeah,
even after being deceived like that, he found a way to heal and move on.
With resilience.
It's a good reminder that even after betrayal,
there's always hope.
For redemption.
For everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Manti Te'o's story,
yeah,
I think the big question is, how do we make sure our online interactions are authentic and respectful?
And based on a genuine desire to connect with other people.
It's something we all need to think about.
Definitely.
It's a conversation that needs to keep happening.
I agree.
And hopefully it will lead to a digital world that's both safer and more fulfilling for all of us.
That's the goal.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great talking about this with you.
And until next time, stay curious and stay connected.